A student from Keilor Downs Secondary College in Melbourne's northwest has tested positive to coronavirus. The school has now been closed for cleaning. A teacher at the school tested positive earlier in the week, and it comes as the Prime Minister and state and territory leaders meet today for the first time in a fortnight to assess how the country is emerging from the coronavirus shutdowns. So here are today's main points. There are calls for the expansion of JobKeeper to be on the agenda, and also whether the National Cabinet should continue beyond the pandemic. The New South Wales Government will further relax coronavirus restrictions from next week. From Monday, 20 people will be able to attend weddings in New South Wales, 50 at places of worship and 50 at funerals, subject to the 4 square metre rule. Religious groups say it'll provide spiritual comfort. A Rockhampton nurse who contracted coronavirus and visited the Queensland town of Blackwater had also been on a recent overseas trip. Blackwater residents held a driveway vigil last night to remember the 30-year-old man who died from COVID-19 this week. Overseas, South Korea has reintroduced tougher social distancing restrictions after a rise in COVID-19 cases there. 79 infections were reported in a day, many linked to an outbreak at nightclubs in Seoul. And some good news for sporting fans. The English Premier League will restart on June the 17th after a 100-day shutdown. The student from Keilor Downs Secondary College in Melbourne's northwest has tested positive to coronavirus. Premier Daniel Andrews says overall the state has recorded 7 new cases.
1,634 cases of coronavirus in Victoria. That's 6 more than yesterday's total, but there are in fact 7 new cases. 1 case was removed because of a data issue. Of those cases, 3 are the result of routine testing. 2 have been in hotel quarantine following overseas travel, and 2 of those are under investigation by our public health team at the moment. There has been a positive case at a school.
In relation to the Keilor Downs student, this is a student who's associated with a family cluster that I announced yesterday, so the acquisition for this student is known, but the student was probably infectious on site on the 26th of this month. Notified yesterday. The school will close today for the usual and routine purposes of contact tracing, identifying exactly who are close contacts and ensuring that those close contacts are quarantined. It'll probably apply to all of the classes that student was in. The student was also in a VET class with some other students from Taylors Lakes and St Albans secondary colleges. Those students, not the schools, but those students will need to be quarantined as well because of that shared space for a time for one VET class. So the acquisition for this student is known, but because of that 1 day with a potential period of infectiousness, there are some close contacts who need to be followed up and quarantined for that purpose.
The federal government has given further hints about extra support for the housing and tourism sectors once the JobKeeper program is expected to finish, and it comes ahead of today's National Cabinet meeting, the first in 2 weeks. Political reporter Jade McMillan has more from Canberra.
Well, yesterday the Reserve Bank Governor Philip Lowe suggested that if the economy hasn't recovered significantly by the end of September, when JobKeeper is due to run out, that the $1,500 a fortnight wage subsidy might need to be extended or at least targeted at particular industries. The government is reviewing the program at the halfway point next month, and Treasurer Josh Frydenberg says it recognises there are some sectors which may need extra help. Now, whether that comes in the form of JobKeeper or perhaps some other kind of support package isn't yet clear, but he's spoken about the tourism industry, which will continue to be affected by the international travel bans for quite some time, and also the housing construction industry, which is expected to slow.
It's not just the plumber and the sparky and the carpenter who are employed on a building site, but it's that full supply chain, the timber mills and other suppliers into a building which are critical. So we're looking at initiatives in that space. Tourism is another one. 70% of the tourism dollar is actually a domestic tourism spend, so it's critically important we lift those border restrictions.
This is the first time that National Cabinet has met in 2 weeks, so there should be plenty for leaders to talk about. They're expected to swap notes on how the easing of restrictions has been going so far in each state and territory. There'll also be discussion about public transport guidelines, how to keep commuters safe as more people return to work. And the future of National Cabinet itself will also be up for discussion. Some state leaders say that it should replace COAG, that it's taken the politics out of these kinds of meetings. Prime Minister Scott Morrison has indicated that he's open to making it a more permanent fixture, so there might be progress on that issue too.
An emergency COVID-19 testing blitz will continue in the central Queensland town of Blackwater after the death of a 30-year-old man earlier this week. The state's health minister, Stephen Miles, says across the state there are 6 active cases remaining.
We have another fantastic day of 0 new cases of COVID-19 here in Queensland, leaving our total number of cases at 1,058. We continue to have 6 active cases spread throughout the state. However, just 1 of those is in hospital. They are in ICU receiving ventilation. We've now completed 176,462 tests.
We had 220 people from Blackwater tested yesterday, which was excellent. They came forward, and we've got more people being tested today. So far there has not been any positive test results, except of course for that unfortunate 30-year-old gentleman who died.
Many states will accelerate their plans from Monday with more people allowed in restaurants and cafes. Reporter Laura Hyams has more from Sydney.
Well, some welcome news really for people all around the country. Beginning in New South Wales from next Monday, the beauty industry will be opening up its doors to allow trade to continue. So that includes nail bars and also tanning salons. The hospitality sector also taking advantage of some of the easing of restrictions. They will now be able to host 50 diners at a time in cafes and restaurants. Of course, social distancing measures will need to be observed. And religious organisations also welcoming the easing of restrictions. Services now will able to host 50 people at a time. Weddings will now be able to have 20 guests, and funerals able to host 50 mourners at a time. Also, interstate travel will also be permitted. Museums and galleries also opening. In South Australia, there's going to be a further easing of restrictions. Gymnasiums and cinemas also throwing open their doors. And in the Northern Territory from next Friday, they will be moving into the 3rd stage of the easing of restrictions, allowing most sectors to open. However, the borders will still remain closed.
Lara, this all comes on the back of some sobering news on the New South Wales economy.
The New South Wales government has painted a picture of the economic impacts of what the pandemic has had upon the economy. The government says revenue will be hit between $10 and $20 billion over 4 years with significant write-downs. And now we know that the Treasurer, Dominic Perrottet, has described this as one of the biggest challenges facing the economy, facing the New South Wales government in generations. He's also defended the move to freeze the wage increases of public sector workers. There's about 400,000 of them in the state, saying that the wage freeze isn't indicative of a worker's worthiness, but rather it's about creating and maintaining jobs in the sector. Now, there's also been a cloud that has been put over some of the biggest spending infrastructure projects, that being the relocation of the Powerhouse Museum and also upgrade to ANZ Stadium. There hasn't been any indication of whether or not those projects will be postponed, but we won't get a clearer picture of the full economic impacts of this virus until the budget is handed down in October.